When my brother disappeared with the money we trusted him with, I thought I'd never forgive him. But I never expected my 14-year-old son would be the one to make him pay. Stay with me while I tell you how it all happened, and if my story means something to you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps. My name is Claire Dawson. I'm 38 years old, a nurse, and a single mom to a boy who means the world to me, Evan. Life hasn't always been easy, but I worked long shifts, picked up overtime, and skipped plenty of things for myself just so I could save. My dream was simple: move us into a better home. A place where Evan could have his own room, where we wouldn't hear neighbors fighting through thin apartment walls, where he could just be a kid. I had managed to save up $22,000. That money wasn't just cash, it was our hope for something better. Then came Jason, my older brother. Jason has always had this charm about him. He can walk into a room and make people laugh, make them trust him. But behind all of that, he's reckless. He's always been the one who gets into trouble, while I was the one cleaning it up. He told me he had a great investment opportunity. He promised it would double our savings in just months. "Claire, you've been working yourself to the bone. Let me help. Trust me, this is how you get ahead," he said with that confident smile he always wore. I wanted to believe him. He was family. And despite all the times he'd disappointed me before, a part of me thought maybe this time would be different. So I handed over the money. All of it. The next morning, Jason was gone. His phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment was empty. It felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. $22,000, everything I had worked for, just vanished. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paperwork for a home I would never get to buy. Tears kept slipping down my face, even though I tried to hold them back. I thought Evan was asleep, but he wasn't. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, then felt his small hand on my shoulder. "Mom," he whispered, his voice steadier than I expected from a 14-year-old. "He won't get away with this." I tried to tell him to let it go, that it wasn't his burden to carry. But he looked me in the eye, and I saw something shift in him that night. Evan wasn't just a boy anymore. He had this fire, this quiet determination. And in that moment, I realized my brother's betrayal hadn't just broken me. It had awakened something in my son. And though I didn't know it then, that promise Evan made in the dark kitchen would change everything. Growing up, Jason was always the golden boy. Our parents adored him. If he skipped school, they laughed it off as him being adventurous. If he got caught drinking too young, they brushed it away, saying boys will be boys. Meanwhile, I was the one expected to keep my grades perfect, to stay out of trouble, to make the family look good. I did everything right, yet somehow, I always felt like the shadow standing behind Jason's bright light. I can still remember the nights when Mom would cry because Jason had gotten into another mess: gambling debts, broken promises, even small run-ins with the law. And every single time, I was the one who stepped up. I would work extra hours, lend him money, or cover for him so our parents wouldn't be embarrassed in front of neighbors. It wasn't just about being the responsible sibling. I think deep down I kept hoping he would change. That one day, he'd look at me and finally say, "Thank you, Claire. I'll do better." But that day never came. Even when Evan was little, he looked up to Jason. My son adored his uncle. He'd light up whenever Jason came around, hanging on to his every word, laughing at his silly jokes. Jason had that effortless charm, the kind that made kids believe in him. I wanted so badly to protect that image for Evan, to let him hold on to the idea that family meant trust, love, and loyalty. But with what Jason did, taking the money and cutting all ties, I couldn't shield Evan from the truth anymore. The days after Jason disappeared were some of the hardest I've ever lived through. I tried to stay strong for Evan, but inside I felt broken. $22,000 gone in an instant. Every late-night shift, every time I skipped buying something for myself, every sacrifice, it was all stolen with one selfish act. I called Jason over and over, left messages that went unanswered. Eventually, his number was disconnected. Just like that, my own brother erased himself from our lives. Evan noticed the change in me. He saw how I came home exhausted, how I sat at the table longer than usual, staring at bills I couldn't cover. But what hurt him most wasn't the money. It was the betrayal. One night, as we washed dishes side by side, Evan broke the silence. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice shaking, "family isn't supposed to do this. Family isn't supposed to hurt you like this." I looked at him, and I could see tears forming in his eyes, but also something harder, anger. Not the kind of anger that flares up and fades away, but something deeper. Something that takes root. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell him not to worry, that we'd be okay, that his uncle didn't matter. But I couldn't lie. Jason had mattered, and his betrayal had cut us both in a way we'd never forget. The weeks after Jason vanished were a blur of stress and sleepless nights. Every bill felt heavier than before, every overdue notice like a slap in the face. I had planned to use that money for a down payment on a house, a place where Evan and I could finally breathe. Now, that dream was gone, and I was back to juggling rent, groceries, and the endless stack of expenses that never seemed to shrink. At work, I tried to keep my head up, but even my coworkers noticed. They'd catch me staring at charts too long or zoning out during conversations. "You okay, Claire?" One of the nurses asked me gently one afternoon. I forced a smile, shrugged, and muttered, "Just tired." I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone the truth. How could I admit that I had trusted my own brother with everything and lost it all? The shame burned too deep. Evan, though, he saw everything. He wasn't the carefree boy he had been just a few weeks earlier. He still went to school, still did his homework, but there was a quietness about him now. He watched me closely, noticing the little things I thought I was hiding. The unopened mail on the counter, the way I rubbed my forehead when I looked at the bank app on my phone, the tears I wiped away when I thought he was asleep. One evening, as I folded laundry, he sat across from me, unusually serious. "Mom," he began carefully, "what kind of places did Uncle Jason hang around? Like, where did he usually go?" I froze for a second, caught off guard. "Why would you want to know that, Evan?" He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "Just curious. He used to talk about poker games and stuff, right? And bars." I sighed, putting the laundry aside. "Yes, he did. Too much, honestly. He had friends that were not the best kind of people." "But why are you asking?" Evan hesitated, then said quietly, "Because people like him shouldn't get to do this. Someone has to stand up to him." His words cut through me. For a moment, I didn't see a 14-year-old boy sitting there. I saw someone older, harder, carrying a weight no kid should have to carry. I shook my head quickly. "No, Evan. That's not your job. He's my brother. It's my mistake, and I'll deal with it. You need to focus on school, on being a kid. Promise me you'll leave this alone." But even as I said it, I could tell he wasn't convinced. His jaw tightened, and his eyes held a determination that frightened me. He didn't argue, didn't say another word, but the silence spoke louder than anything. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized the fallout wasn't just about money. It was about what it was doing to us, changing me, and changing Evan in ways I wasn't ready to face. It happened on a Sunday afternoon when I ran into Mark, an old mutual friend of Jason's. We were standing in line at the grocery store, just chatting about small things, when he asked, "Hey, Claire, has Jason gotten back to you yet?" The question caught me so off guard that I nearly dropped the bag of apples I was holding. I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. "No." "Why?" Mark looked uncomfortable, scratching the back of his neck. "Oh, I just thought. Well, I heard someone saw him over at the Rusted Rail the other night. You know that old dive bar by the highway? Figured he might have reached out to you." I forced a weak smile and muttered something about not having heard from him, then rushed to pay for my groceries. The Rusted Rail. The name stuck in my mind like a splinter. Jason was out there, still living his life while I was drowning in bills and humiliation. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table long after Evan had gone to his room. I debated with myself over and over. Should I go there? Should I confront Jason? But the thought of walking into a smoky bar filled with his shady friends made my stomach twist. What would I even say? That he ruined me? That he stole his nephew's future? The humiliation felt unbearable. He wouldn't care anyway. He'd laugh, just like always. I finally sighed, buried my face in my hands, and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." I thought Evan was asleep by then. I thought my son was safe in his bed, dreaming about basketball or video games. But I underestimated him. In his room, Evan lay on his stomach with a notebook open in front of him. He had written down, "The Rusted Rail, bar by the highway." Uncle Jason spotted there. His handwriting was small but neat, the letters pressed hard into the page. He tapped his pen against the paper as if organizing pieces of a puzzle only he could see. He flipped to another page where he had been keeping notes for weeks. Scribbles about things Jason used to mention at family gatherings, places he gambled, names of friends he had bragged about. At 14, Evan had started creating a map of his uncle's world. one I didn't even realize he was piecing together. I walked past his door on my way to bed, pausing for a moment when I noticed a faint glow under the crack. I assumed he was just sneaking in a little extra time on his phone. I didn't open the door. I didn't know that instead of scrolling through games or texting friends, my son was quietly preparing. While I tried to bury my shame in silence, Evan was busy memorizing every detail of Jason's life. He wasn't letting this go. Not now, not ever. And in that quiet, determined way, he was beginning a plan I had no idea existed. I don't know what finally pushed me to do it. Maybe it was the growing pile of unpaid bills on the counter, or maybe it was the way Evan had started watching me with quiet, worried eyes. Whatever it was, one night after work, I drove to the rusted rail. My hands shook on the steering wheel the whole way there. The bar looked even worse than I'd imagined. Faded neon lights buzzed in the window, and the parking lot was littered with broken bottles and cigarette butts. I sat there for a moment, heart pounding, before finally pushing myself through the door. The smell of stale beer and smoke hit me instantly, and the noise of laughter and clinking glasses felt like a wall pressing in. And then I saw him, Jason. He was leaning against the bar, drink in hand, laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. For a moment, I froze. He looked older, rougher around the edges, but still had that same careless charm that had fooled so many people, including me. When he spotted me, his grin widened. Well, look who it is. Little sister finally found me. I walked straight up to him, my voice shaking but firm. Where's the money, Jason? He smirked, taking a long sip from his glass before answering. Gone. What did you expect? You hand me cash, I take it to the tables. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. That's life. My chest tightened. That was everything I had. That was for Evan. For our future. Jason leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. Then maybe don't be so stupid next time. If you were dumb enough to hand it to me, that's on you. His words cut deeper than I thought possible. The humiliation burned hot in my cheeks. Around us, people laughed and shouted over games of pool, completely unaware that my world was collapsing all over again. I turned and walked out before the tears spilled over. By the time I got back to the car, I was shaking. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, whispering to myself, I'm done. I'm done with him. It was a promise, but it felt hollow. That night back at home, I couldn't hold it in. I sat at the kitchen table, my head in my hands, and cried. The sound must have carried down the hallway, because before long, I felt Evan's presence nearby. He didn't say anything, just stood there in the doorway, watching. When I finally lifted my head, his eyes were hard, his fists clenched at his sides. For a boy of 14, he looked older in that moment, angrier, stronger. He didn't speak, but I knew what he was thinking. If I wasn't going to fight back, then he would. And for the first time, I realized my son's anger was sharper than mine, and far more dangerous. Evan was only 14, but after that night, something inside him shifted. He stopped asking me questions about Jason. Instead, he started moving quietly, like he was carrying a secret. I thought he was just spending more time with friends, maybe trying to distract himself from the betrayal. But I was wrong. He was watching, learning, planning. After school, he'd tell me he was heading over to a classmate's house to work on homework. I believed him, never suspecting the truth. In reality, Evan was taking the bus across town, slipping into places no boy his age should have been. He stayed just far enough behind Jason to remain unseen, but close enough to study him. He learned quickly that Jason had no real home anymore. Some nights, Jason's car sat outside a cheap motel. Other nights, it was parked near the rusted rail or another dive bar. Evan noticed the pattern. Tuesdays and Fridays were his gambling nights, when Jason would swagger in with whatever money he had scraped together and stagger out hours later, broke and bitter. Evan saw how Jason moved, who he talked to, and who he owed. He watched as Jason slipped into back rooms with men who looked dangerous, men who didn't laugh at his jokes the way others did. He saw Jason leave with his shoulders tense, muttering under his breath, clutching his empty pockets. The more Evan observed, the more he understood. His uncle wasn't some untouchable trickster. He was a desperate man on the edge, and desperation made people sloppy. Jason's biggest weakness wasn't just the gambling, it was his greed. When he was drunk, he bragged loudly about how he was one big win away from turning it all around. He told anyone who would listen that he had connections, that he knew where the money was. It wasn't true, but the words poured out of him anyway, dangerous words to the wrong ears. Back in his room at night, Evan began writing it all down. His notebook filled with neat lists, Jason's hangouts, times he gambles, people he owes, what he drinks, what he brags about. Every detail mattered. Each piece of information was another thread in the web Evan was quietly spinning. He didn't rush. He was patient, almost frighteningly so for someone his age. He understood that Jason wasn't just careless, he was predictable. And predictable people could be controlled. One evening, while I thought Evan was buried in schoolwork, he was actually sketching out a plan. He wrote at the top of the page, how to make him pay without touching him. Underneath, he drew arrows connecting Jason's debts, his drinking, his bragging, and the men he owed money to. It wasn't revenge in the way most people imagined. Evan didn't want to hurt his uncle with his own hands. He wanted Jason's world to turn against him, to let the very greed that drove him destroy him. And piece by piece, Evan was preparing the trap. Evan knew he couldn't pull this off alone. He needed someone older, someone who understood how people like Jason thought. That's when he turned to Zane Mitchell, a 16-year-old from our neighborhood. Zane wasn't the type of kid most parents trusted. He was sharp, a little rough around the edges, but he had a good heart. More importantly, he looked out for Evan. When Evan told him everything, Zane didn't laugh or call him crazy. He just nodded slowly, then said, "If you're serious about this, I'll help. But we have to be smart. Your uncle sounds like the kind of guy who'll chase easy money. So let's give him something to chase." Together, they began to craft a story, a fake big score opportunity. Zane knew how to spread rumors without getting caught. Word started slipping into the right circles. A man in town was sitting on a pile of cash, waiting for the right partner to help move it. It was vague, just enough to sound believable, just enough for someone desperate to bite. Evan fed the details carefully, making sure Jason would hear them through the people he drank with. He played on Jason's weakness, his greed and his need to brag. Sure enough, within days, Jason was puffing his chest at the poker table, telling anyone who would listen that his luck was about to turn. "You'll see," he slurred to one of his drinking buddies, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "I'm about to make it big. Everyone who thinks I'm down is going to be begging me for favors soon." The more Jason talked, the more convinced he became. He started showing up at the bar with a swagger, as if he already had the money in his pocket. The men who once looked down on him leaned in, hungry for scraps of his so-called secret. Meanwhile, back at home, I began to notice changes in Evan. He stayed up later than usual, his lamp glowing under the crack of his door long past midnight. Sometimes I'd knock softly and ask, "Honey, what are you working on?" He would look up from his desk, his face calm, and answer, "Just homework, Mom. A project for school." I believed him because why wouldn't I? He was a good student, always ahead in his classes. I had no idea that instead of math problems or essays, he and Zane were scribbling notes about how to lure Jason into the trap. The plan was simple but dangerous. Lead Jason straight into the hands of the very people he owed money to. Let his lies and arrogance do the work. Evan didn't smile much anymore, but when Zane clapped him on the back one night and said, "He's gonna fall for it, no doubt," I swear I saw the faintest spark of satisfaction in my son's eyes. Jason thought he was about to climb out of the hole he had dug. What he didn't know was that Evan and Zane were holding the shovel, and they were about to bury him in it. Jason swaggered into the empty parking lot behind the rusted rail, his jacket collar flipped up, his eyes darting around like a man expecting a miracle. The hum of a flickering street lamp cast shadows across the cracked pavement. He thought tonight would be different. Tonight, he'd finally win back control. He muttered to himself, "Easy money. Quick score. Then I'm back on top." But the silence was heavy, too heavy. Jason shifted uneasily, scanning for the supposed connect, who was bringing the cash. He rubbed his hands together, already rehearsing how he'd boast to Claire once he had the money, how he'd tell her she was wrong to doubt him. His arrogance fueled him, even as unease scratched at the back of his mind. Then, headlights cut through the dark. A black sedan rolled up, stopping with a low growl. Jason grinned, his nerves easing. "Finally," he said under his breath. But when the doors opened, his smirk faltered. It wasn't some small-time hustler with a wad of bills. It was two of the very men he'd been ducking for weeks, men he owed thousands to. Their presence froze Jason's blood. He forced a laugh, lifting his hands. Boys, what's this? I thought we had an understanding." The taller one, a bald man with a scar down his cheek, stepped closer. "Yeah, we do. You pay up or you bleed. You think you could run around bragging about some big payout, and we wouldn't hear about it." Jason's mouth went dry. He stammered, That was just talk. You know me, always running my mouth. The shorter man cut him off with a shove against the hood of the car. You got cash on you? Jewelry? Keys? Jason's heart pounded as he fumbled for excuses. I just need a little more time. I swear I'm good for it. But his hands betrayed him, reaching for his wallet, his watch, even the keys to his old sedan parked a few feet away. One by one, they stripped him of everything, his car, his valuables, even the cash he'd been holding on to for his next poker game. Each item felt like a piece of his ego being carved away. The men laughed at his desperation. You're done, Jason, the scarred man said. Next time we see you empty-handed, it won't just be your car we take. Jason, trembling and sweating, tried to keep face, but his voice cracked. This isn't fair. Someone set me up. His eyes darted around the lot, searching for the phantom betrayer. He couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching, that someone had pulled the rug from under him. And someone was. From a rooftop across the street, Evan crouched low, heart thudding in his chest as he watched it all unfold. He clutched his notebook tight, every detail burned into his mind. His plan had worked. Jason's greed had done the rest. Jason stumbled away into the night, stripped and humiliated, with the realization sinking in like poison. The world was finally turning against him. What he didn't know was that it wasn't the world. It was a boy with clenched fists and a burning need for justice. A few days later, there was a knock at the door. I was folding laundry when I heard it, my heart skipping a beat. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. Jason, the same man who had stolen everything from me, who had vanished without a trace, who had left me drowning in bills and despair. When I opened the door, I was met with a sight that stunned me. Jason looked broken. His once confident posture was gone, replaced by a slouch that made him look small. His clothes were wrinkled, his shoes scuffed and dirty, and his eyes darted nervously between me and the ground. He held out his hands, shaking slightly. Claire, I need your help. Please. I don't have anything left. I've messed up, I know I have. I'm sorry. Just help me get back on my feet. For a moment, I didn't move. I stared at him, anger and disbelief battling against the part of me that had always been the forgiving sister. I could feel my chest tighten, memories of lost savings, endless nights of worry, and humiliated confrontations rushing back. My hands gripped the doorframe, as if I needed it to hold myself upright. I can't, I finally said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm done, Jason. I'm done with you. He opened his mouth, probably to beg more, but I slammed the door in his face. The sound echoed in the hallway, leaving a ringing silence behind. My heart pounded, a mix of relief and lingering fear, and I leaned against the door, breathing hard. I had done it. I had finally drawn a line. Evan appeared behind me, quiet as a shadow. I hadn't even heard him move. He looked calm, but there was a weight in his eyes that made my heart skip. You don't need to worry about him anymore, Mom, he said softly, almost like a whisper. I made him pay. I turned to him, stunned. What do you mean, Evan? My voice trembled, a mixture of awe and fear. He shrugged, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I set things up. He got what he deserved. You don't have to deal with him anymore. I felt a flood of emotions crash over me, pride, disbelief, fear. My son. My little boy. He wasn't so little anymore. He had done what I couldn't, what I hadn't had the strength to do. He had stood up to the man who had betrayed us, and he had won. I pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. Evan, you're not a child anymore. You're someone strong. Someone who fights for the people you love when they can't fight for themselves. He hugged me back, calm and steady, like he had done exactly what was meant to be done. I could feel his courage, his cleverness, and his loyalty. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. Jason was gone, our life was ours again, and I realized something profound. My son had stepped into the role of protector, of fighter, of someone I could lean on. And I finally understood that we were going to be okay. Jason vanished from town soon after that night, leaving behind a trail of humiliation and unpaid debts. Word spread quickly among the people he had conned and owed money to. No one wanted to deal with him, and the few who had once laughed at his antics now avoided him completely. His charm had crumbled, replaced by desperation and shame. He became a ghost in our neighborhood, a cautionary tale whispered among those who knew him. For Claire and Evan, life began to feel lighter almost immediately. The weight of Jason's betrayal started to lift, replaced by a sense of control and hope. I started focusing on rebuilding what I had lost little by little. Bills that had piled up were slowly managed, and the dream of a better home didn't feel impossible anymore. Evan helped too, taking on responsibilities beyond his age, but doing so quietly, without complaint. We began saving again, cautiously this time, but with renewed determination. Our bond changed. It was no longer just mother and son. It had become a partnership. We worked together, planning, organizing, and watching out for each other in ways that felt equal. Evan's sharp mind and unwavering courage amazed me every day, and I could see the pride he carried in knowing he had protected us. I felt a mix of awe and gratitude, recognizing that the son I had raised with love had grown into someone capable, strong, and wise beyond his years. One evening, we were sitting at the kitchen table, counting the small pile of savings we had managed to put together so far. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Evan leaned back in his chair, a small, satisfied smile on his face. "Mom," he said, his voice calm but confident, "we're going to be okay, because he can't touch us anymore." I paused, looking at him, trying to fully absorb the weight of his words. And he was right. Jason's power over us had ended. The fear, the stress, the uncertainty, they were behind us. What remained was hope, determination, and the unbreakable bond between mother and son. I thought about everything that had happened. The sleepless nights, the tears, the anger, the planning, and the eventual triumph. My brother had betrayed me, yes. He had stolen my money, humiliated me, and vanished when I needed him most. But in that betrayal, a new truth had emerged. It was my son, my Evan, who had become our protector, our savior. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You know," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, "your father might not be here, but I've always known you were special. I just didn't realize how much you could do until now." Evan shrugged lightly, smiling, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that made me proud. "We're a team now, Mom. Nothing can touch us if we stick together." And for the first time in months, I believed it. Our past was behind us, Jason was gone, and the future was ours to shape. In that moment, I realized the true meaning of family, courage, and resilience. My brother's betrayal had taken so much, but it had given me something far greater. A son who would always fight for me, a bond that nothing could break, and the promise of a new beginning. Do you think Claire made the right choice by letting Jason face the consequences on his own? Or should she have confronted him differently? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story.